today I want to talk to you a little bit about the meditation. I'm exceedingly pleased with what's going on for so many of you with this meditation. And some of you kind of don't know what to expect. Some wonder how they know if it's working or not. Others of you have done some amazing things with it. Several of you have taken it into your dream work, which is a really good sign that you're allowing this process to deepen you. I want to say a little bit about meditations in general and meditators in general. Often it's kind of easy to tell the seasoned meditator from the beginning meditator, not because of how long they sit or how long they've been sitting or things like that, but in terms of how they approach a meditation. Now, this little meditation is a very simple visualization, but it is amazingly powerful. In those of you that know the Tibetan tradition probably know that in my own training, we were given these really intense tantric meditations to do, where we'd hang a thangka in front of us. And those of you that know what Tibetan thangkas look like know they are filled with detail. And we had to memorize every single detail on that rendering. And we would have to hold all of the detail in mind as we then perform some esoteric, or often very, very high meditations. But in my own teaching, I found that well, first of all, the length of time it takes for one to learn how to do that and do it well is usually not accomplished in one lifetime. If you meet someone who is good at it in a given lifetime, there's a pretty good chance that they've done it before, because it just takes lifetimes to develop a level of consciousness that can be that broad and that detail oriented all at the same time, and to hold that and then do a meditation on top of that, usually with a deity. I sometimes use the word Tantra when I talk about other kinds of meditations as well, and there's a reason for it. Tantra, there's a tradition in the West that's very similar. It's called alchemical meditation. And the idea is, with your mind, you create an additional reality. And all of the training that we got by staring at those thangkas year after year after year, sometimes lifetime after lifetime, was to be able to hold all of this detail so that we could offer something, hopefully, that would be beneficial for humanity. Sometimes I think in many spiritual, well, certainly all through the Piscean age, the spiritual process was really an individual process. You know, each individual was connecting with his or her divine guide and teacher, and doing the practices that were given. And the whole idea was, whether in well, it's termed differently. Christians look for salvation. That's not, by the way, outside any of the Eastern traditions. We just maybe define it a little bit differently. But my teachers always told me that I did need salvation. I need to be saved from my own ego. And I think just about everybody would recognize that. But then whether we talk about God realization, self-realization, enlightenment, and even moving toward ascension, all of these stages have to do with the individual, or so they have previously been seen. And one of the things that is really becoming apparent about the Aquarian age is that it's no longer a time of the individual. Even though astrologically we would say people who are born under the sign of Aquarius are said to be individualistic and that their path is the individual, in this case, we have to sort of redefine what the individual is. And it's not the individual person so much as it is the individual galaxy, maybe the individual cosmos. So we're looking to a much bigger picture now. And one of the things that I found in working with students in the West who haven't had years in a monastery and who haven't had one-on-one teaching with great meditation teachers, it's not to say they haven't had any meditation teachers, many have, but it's a little different when you're in a dedicated situation where that's what you do all day long. Your life is fairly ordered. You know what time you're going to get up. You know when the first meditation is. You know when you brush your teeth. Everything is organized so that you don't have to think very much about the worldly concerns. Well, as we enter the Aquarian age, we can really see that the world needs all of us. And so what I have seen in working with Western students has been very educational for me, and it's given me a great appreciation for how the mind works and the areas that are very much the same and the areas that seem to be quite different. And usually the differences align with cultural differences. The part that is the same is that in everyone, there is a deep impulse to evolve. It's a spiritual impulse. Now, for some, it's easier to find than others, and this usually just indicates they've been working at it a few more lifetimes. For others, it seems quite hidden, and yet it is there. And so what I find to be very effective is to take a meditation that is simple, that does not require years or lifetimes to master, but then to approach it as if it is sacred Tantra. That it is teaching you how to recreate your own reality. And if we have enough people doing it together, then it recreates the reality of a much bigger level. So I've been really interested to follow what's going on in your pods and seeing how many of you are relating to the mantra. And it's just three syllables: Om, Ah, and Hum. Or if you prefer the Tibetan, Hung. Either one works, you get the same results, whether you're doing the Sanskrit version or whether you're doing the Tibetan version. But the idea is all about purification. Now, in Tibet, sometimes the Tibetans did things a little bit backwards from the way they were taught by their Indian teachers. And so, for instance, when you're counting the breath, most people will count, they'll start with the in-breath, and at the close of the out-breath closes it. So it seems like the in-breath starts it, the out-breath closes it. Just the opposite in Tibetan. You start with the out-breath and you end with the in-breath. And this is a little bit awkward for most Westerners and, well, almost any other culture to do. But also one of the things is that when we're talking about body, speech, and mind, in my own teaching, these were called the three gates, since they're the way that we interact with the world, the way we take in information and we give out information. It's easy to see that in speech, but it's also easy to see that in mind. And then your body is what's doing all of those activities, whether you walk up to someone, and nowadays in the US, they're bumping elbows rather than shaking hands, but you have some kind of connection where the body does some things. Well, all the time you're taking in information at many, many other levels. So we have these three gates. And my own training was that you want to purify these three gates because these are the sources for releasing information and taking in information, and not just speech, all kinds of emotional information, spiritual information, sometimes psychic information. So when we talk about purifying body, we think of the head. In Tibetan, we don't think of the lower ones, lower chakras, because the head chakras vibrate at the highest frequency. And you know, my teachers always told me that when I use the word that translates to human or human being, I should always say it with awe. And I should always think not of the foibles of humanity, but I should think of everything it is possible to be in this state. And so, again, a little bit different way of thinking, but it makes perfect sense, given that's the way to think about the word human, that when we purify body, we take the part of the body that has chakras with the highest frequencies. So Om is to purify body, and you bring in all of this white light. You let it course through your body and let it heal you, and let it be a signal to yourself that you're holding a desire to purify your bodies. And it's interesting nowadays because you breathe very dirty air in some situations. Sometimes the food is contaminated with all manner of things. So the physical level really needs purification. We do that with the sound Om because that brings the divine inside. While Om is also kind of a greeting, it's how you greet the divine. So when you're saying it in meditation, you're greeting the divine within. And this is very important. It's why you want to purify body, so that you have a temple that can just hold greater and greater levels of divine energy and divine awareness. So Om purifies body. Then as you, about halfway through the breath, you switch to the syllable Ah. And you see red energy just coming right in the throat. Now, we purify speech with red energy, but we have to be very careful. We don't want it to slip into kind of a murky color or a darker, denser color, maybe with browns or grays in it. We want a really vibrant red, because that is the color of a pure heart. And so you want the energy of a pure heart to purify your speech. So you see, when your speech comes from the heart, it's purer than when it's just coming right off the ego's impulses, you see? And then whom is, we think of body, speech, and mind is heart. And some of you have heard, I've done a couple of lectures where we talk about the longest journey you will ever take is the journey from the head to the heart. Because what we want is the mind to come from the heart. So it's filled with love. It's a place where we can access bodhicitta. And so when you purify the heart, it's not about taking anything in. It's about putting out the sound of the whom or the home. And my teachers told me to think of that sound as the sound of a great Buddha. It doesn't have to be Buddhist. It can be any great spiritual being, but of that being touching earth with love, with compassion. And so the heart gives in its purification, right? It gives love, it gives understanding, and it generates this wish that everybody could be happy, and not just people, but animals, even the plants, that happiness could abound, and that people will treat each other with love and respect and purity. And so when you are doing this little 3-step visualization, it's not just to help you feel good, although many of you are seeing it brings you to a centered space, a calm space. It's that you're doing your spiritual work at the level of all 3 gates. And so when you bring in the Om, think of your body as being purified by divine light, that is your essence, much more than the physical cells, you see? The physical cells can hold some of that light, and you certainly can circulate that light with your breath on the course or the flow of your blood, along the transmissions of your nervous system. All of these transmit this light, but think of it as a purification, because you want this physical body to be so pure so that you can hold more divine consciousness. You can awaken more deeply into the reality that sometimes seems quite hidden. So, and then with the speech, to have purified speech, speech that comes from a radiant heart, that speaks love, that engenders kindness, that encourages others, and that seeks to heal just with making the word or the sounds of the words. And this is why really in Tibetan, I guess you could say Sanskrit was similar to what you know in the West as the liturgical language of Tibetan Buddhism. Now, it's kind of interesting because it wasn't, we didn't have a liturgy, so it isn't quite the same. But all of the great teachings, all of the great writings use Sanskrit, and all of the sounds that we use were Sanskrit. Now we have Tibetan names for them, and over years we began to use them kind of interchangeably. But the hung for the heart, is it the heart of the Buddha? The heart of a great being. It does not have to be Buddhist. I use that flavor because I believe there is so much in the standard old Buddhist teachings that are good for people today. So when you purify your heart, you do it through your giving, through your offering of love, and through your being grateful. These are all heart energies that purify mind, you see? And so I hope I haven't raised more confusion than I've answered, because we just turn things around a little bit. So the mind is in the heart, the body is thought of in the head, or is represented by the head, and then there's this wonderful throat chakra right here in between that brings from the brilliance of the heart and hopefully engages the very highest part of body and mind. So I hope that's helpful for some of you. Keep on meditating. I love that some of you are really letting yourselves be guided by this little meditation. It's very simple. And, it's tempting, I think, for the novice to say, oh, it's too simple. It's not doing anything for me. Whereas the seasoned meditator comes in and says, oh, how can I use this to transform my reality? And that's what this little meditation will do. It's so powerful. I'm probably going to be adding a little more to it as we go along. I want you to still just sit with being with your breath for now. Being with your breath. Designate your breath as holy breath. See your breath as if the cosmos is breathing through you, or whoever you feel your highest teacher or your highest divine being is. See that being, or perhaps that group of beings, as breathing through you. And of course, you want body, speech, and mind to be utterly pure so that you become a great temple for the presence of the living divine.